Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, I got to see you last night.
I know. We got to go to Firehouse over there in South Loop on Michigan. It was delicious. We got to hang out with past guest, Dr. David Schifrin, episode 49. I mean, what a great conversation we had, the three of us last night, and a great meal.
Yeah, that was good. Dave, thanks for putting that together. But I don't get to motor all that often, so that's cool for me.
Yeah, and the sneak preview, one of the motives that we went was to see David's, he's got a rooftop balcony over there that maybe we're going to do a Straight Up Chicago event there coming up in the spring. So that was really the initial reason, but ended up being really good conversation and food.
Yeah, and conversation, something that I was able to share with you guys. There's a Roadhouse 2 out there.
Oh man, anybody that loves Roadhouse, anyone that knows me knows I love the movie Roadhouse, man, with Patrick Swayze. And I don't know how it came up in conversation, but Tom shared with me there's actually a Roadhouse 2 out there. And I literally went home last night, tried finding. I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't tell you this part. I couldn't find anywhere last night to stream it. I ordered a DVD in the mail last night. I ordered a DVD. Now I gotta go find a DVD player to hook it up. I gotta watch it, man, this weekend.
Coming full circle to real estate, tax appeal specialist Tim Jacobs was the one who let me know that Roadhouse 2 Last Call is a real thing. and then Chance Badisher does my transaction attorney. I know his kickball team is Pat Kick Swayze, which is a great kickball team name.
Man, I watched anyone that would listen to me last night or that knows it. I sent them the trailer for that. I'm like, did you guys know this existed? I was so excited last night. So that made my night. Everything else that wonderful happened in that networking experience. That was my highlight. Today's episode is awesome. Let's tell our little housing provider tip so we get on with the episode. But
go for it. Go right in.
Today's housing provider tip. For whatever reason, the last 10 years, I feel like every plumber wants to jet out my sewer lines in the front yard versus rotting out. That's became a thing that's been bigger. And I just want to caution anybody that has an older building, because when that power jet, when they jet out your pipeline to the street, man, your pipes are old. Some of your pipes might be 40, 50 years old. So even your new ones, what happens is they jet it out and it hits the city line that connects with your line in your yard that could be newer, but then it does something damaging there to the city line, which then you have a whole nother problem. Sometimes it's not your fault, but you still got to deal with it. And anyone that's had a sewer line issue that they have to actually deal with the city on, it's not easy. So I caution anybody, hopefully no offense to any plumbers out there, but the blowing out the lines has been something that is something we try to stay away from as much as possible and do more traditional rotting when needed. So,
a tip. All right, today's guest. Bring it in, Mark.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was
about real stories, man. No fluff. This is it. This is ups and downs. This is good.
I think today's episode that there was a couple moments in it where it's I didn't see that coming, or I was almost taken back, or I almost didn't know what the next. I had a list of questions to ask, but I didn't know what to ask next because I'm like, maybe we should go deeper on this. Crazy story, man. But today's episode, we had South Suburban. He's from Richmond Park. He's a broker now. He's been an investor since before the recession. He shares some really stories that he really learned some hard lessons. And today's episode was a reason why we put it out there, is to have people like Alex on and be able to kind of share these points, because a lot of people that haven't started or haven't ran into problems, you will eventually, but he really gets vulnerable today and we appreciate it. But without further ado, I want to welcome Alex Fenske. All right, Alex, man, excited to have you on here. We talked a little outside of the show. Just happy, you're a Southsider, a lifelong Chicagoan. I'm guessing a White Sox fan.
That is correct, sir.
All right. And you got the rumors out there that the White Sox potentially might be looking to maybe move to the suburbs or maybe move to Nashville. So I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, it depends. If it's suburbs, I'm extremely excited about that. Make the games a little bit closer, probably get to a few more. If it's Nashville, I'm not sure where I'm going to tailgate. I don't know who I'm going to cheer for because it's not going to be a Nashville team. So we will see.
Yeah, man. And the funny thing is, this kind of correlates with real estate development, but some of the pressures that the White Sox are putting on is just the lack of investment around that becoming more of an entertainment district. Wrigley, Fenway, all these stadiums have all these bars, restaurants, entertainment stuff around it. And Bridgeport's always kind of opposed that. So it's kind of crazy how the community who loves them and everyone in Bridgeport's diehard Sox, but like they almost might chase them away because of their old fashioned, old school mentality with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I going this summer, I saw there had been even more development since when I last saw it. But yeah, when the neighborhood's resistant to it, it's tough. But Wrigleyville used to be that way too. I was at this networking event back in probably, I don't know, 08, 09. And there was a guy who was a financial planner, and he had relocated to the Chicago area in the early 80s from somewhere else. And he was asking people where you should buy a home. He was looking for a 2-unit. Back then, they didn't call it house hacking, but that's what he was doing. And he was like, yeah, where should I go? And he told them he was looking in like the Lincoln Park, Lakeview area. They said, that's fine. Just don't buy anything west of Clark, because it's really a bad area. You don't want to be west of Clark. That was in the early 80s. He bought this 2-unit for $19,000. And when I was talking with him, he had recently sold it for $900 and something thousand west of Clark. Now, these days, there's no bad area anywhere around there. But 30, 40 years ago, Wrigleyville was that way. 20, 30 years ago, Bridgeport was that way. So I don't know. Maybe they'll still make it around.
Yeah, Bridgeport's definitely climbed. I wish I would have bought more when the market crashed over there. But even you think about like Woodlawn, like I bought 4 units for 30, 40 grand, and we're selling them for 700,000, 800,000 now. It's like I would never have thought that would have happened. So yeah, you never know.
Mark, time is your biggest asset.
Time is your biggest asset. That shirt is in the mail. It's coming. Straight up Chicago. Time is your best asset. So
I like it.
Alex, talk to us. You've been an investor since the 2000s. Tell us kind of how you got into it. Maybe I think touch on your previous career, and let's hear it.
Yeah, the whole real estate world was really unknown and foreign to me. I never moved growing up. I ended up as a broker selling my childhood home just a few years ago. So I never moved. And, my family was one, if we talk in terms of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, it was Poor Dad. My mom was a first generation college student and taught me all those lessons that are valuable from the Poor Dad side, which is get a good job, save your money, plan for retirement, don't spend more than you make. And I grew up with that. And that was my knowledge of money. My first job out of college, I was in a sales job at Wells Fargo Financial. So we sold mortgages, car loans, small loans, credit cards. And about a year in, I was living on the north side. In fact, at this particular moment, I was moving from a place over in like the Humboldt Park area into an apartment directly across from Wrigley Field. So I had to take my Sox stuff and I put it way at the back of the apartment so that I wouldn't get vandalized. Because I knew if I hung my Sox flags right in the front on Waveland Avenue, I would have problems. So we're moving into this place on Waveland, and my buddy and I had the U-Haul parked in the lot adjacent to it, just as we went inside to prop open some doors. And we walk out, and the truck is gone. It's not totally gone. They're finishing hooking it up and driving it away onto the tow truck.
Like out of a movie.
It was a matter of seconds, seriously. So now I was already feeling kind of pinched financially at this moment, because I had to put the security deposit down on that apartment, and I hadn't gotten it back yet for my other one because I hadn't moved out. I don't know, probably a matter of $800 or $900 or something. Tow truck gets or the U-Haul gets towed. We end up having to get that out. I think it was another $850 or something like that between the two of us. And right around that same time, something hit my windshield. Windshield of my car broke, so I had to have them fix that. It was $350. It was just a handful of what I would now consider to be really small or minor expenses, but all at one time inside of like a 30-day period. What happened in that moment was I realized at the end of the month that is the first time I was ever going to carry a credit card balance. Now, mind you, I'm only a year out of college. I haven't had a whole lot of time to go into debt, right? But I always paid everything off at the end of the month, and that was really important to me. Remember the lesson: don't spend more than you make. So I always paid it off, and I just used it to build credit. And here I can't. The balance was probably $1,200 or something, but it freaked me out. And I vowed at that moment, I thought it was silly that just a few everyday things could lead to me being unable to uphold my financial principles. And I thought, well, I'm not going to let that happen again. And I wasn't sure how I was going to build a better financial life. But I vowed to myself at that point that I would. And what's kind of ironic is that financial troubles. Oh, I ran into some after that, and it wasn't a matter of $1,200, but it was at that moment that I realized that I desired something more, and that I didn't want to be paycheck to paycheck to the point where just one or two of these little life occurrences could derail me.
Yeah. So Alex, I can empathize. I too did the Wells Fargo path out of college.
Oh,
so
did you
said
really?
credit manager. You're not earning that
Yes, credit
VCP check
manager.
yet.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so I think you're making a cool 30 G's out of college, and 9 out of 10 guys aren't going to make it.
It was like
year
31.5, bro. It was like 31.5. Okay.
No, see, I was down in Plainfield, man. I didn't get the city number.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I was at the Hickory Hills branch.
It's full circle though. Like through the Wells Fargo, that's how I met Blake McCrite, who got me started in real estate. That's how my GC Chris Clancy through others down there. So like, I don't know. I've always felt indebted to the old wagon.
Yep, and it ended up being a part of me getting into investing, because what happened right after that was one of my coworkers there at that office. His name is Raymond Jones, and I'm still in touch with him today, along with several of the other people from there. But he got so worked up talking to me about how, I'm young and I got good credit and I need to be using this to buy real estate and build wealth through real estate ownership. And I had no idea what he was talking about, because again, I'd never moved, and my parents weren't investors. I didn't know anything about it. And I believe it was Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is the first book that he recommended that I picked up, and it really just cracked my mind open. I'd never thought of those things. I'd never been introduced to the ideas of investment and leverage and wealth building. I had no idea. And so when I read all that, I kind of got hooked and started to want to learn more, pick up some of the other books in the series and some of the other ones, from that whole category, and realized that there really was so much more that was possible than what I really imagined prior to that. So actually, kind of, as you said, I owe my sort of investment awakening to that job and the people at that job too.
That's awesome. Let's
another
talk
book
about
that
getting started now, right? Like we have this epiphany, but let's talk about how, you actually have to take some action steps here.
Yeah. So it got a little interesting. This would have been in the move that I just told you about, which was part of what kicked all this off. That would have been probably in June of 2007.
Oh, it's hot.
Yeah. And at that point, remember, now I'm looking for something different. I'm probably 21 years old, right? And I'm looking for hope. I think had started to realize that wasn't the best job for me. I was okay at it, but I don't like being okay at stuff. And I've been in it for a year. So I'm like, I'm kind of looking around to see what else is out there. I run into, I can't remember. I think either I had my resume out there or someone contacted me off of that, or I reached out on a job ad, and it turned out to be this real estate education networking company. And I went to one of their little info sessions, and they were selling the hope I was buying. And this seemed to me like this. Okay, here it is. I found my ticket. Here I am learning about real estate investment, learning about wealth building, and here is the place where I can do it. And so that would have been in the summer of 2007.
What was that company?
That was Nouveau Riche.
All right, that's what I thought you were going to say. Yeah, they had a lot of people with that same vision that you had locked in.
Well, as a side note, and now being in I guess home sales or whatever, if you're a business owner or a business leader, you're in sales. You guys know that. And one thing that organization did really well is they sold the dream. They really painted the picture and helped you see a vision of what could be. And when done ethically, I think that's a really effective technique to get people bought into what you're doing. I have some mixed feelings about that organization, and I'm happy to share them if you want.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, that's all part of the experience. Like how'd that go wrong? They don't exist anymore for certain reasons. Like talk to us about kind of what happened, because these are all things that repeat themselves in the cycles. Yeah.
They were selling real estate investing education, and it was a network marketing organization, and the prices of the education were very high, 5 figures high. And we didn't have the funds, and I say we. So at the same time I was doing this, there was a guy that I grew up with, and then a former teacher of mine that I'd stayed in touch with, and all three of us were starting to get. I think we'd all attended this info session together, and we were starting to talk about, oh, do you want to do this, and how do we pull it off, and we did. We managed to get it done and buy this education, and we started plugging into it, and it wasn't much later that I ended up leaving my job, which would have been in October of 2007. And the three of us, empowered with all this knowledge and this new hopes and dreams that we'd acquired, we were going to go out, raise money, buy a property, sell it, hold it, whatever. And this was going to be our full-time job. We were going to rely on the income from doing this.
Well, how, I mean, you just got done saying it was 5 figures, and I mean, you weren't swimming in cash. Like, where'd you come up with the money? Like,
they had a student loan program.
Oh, okay. So you borrowed. Okay.
Yep.
That's even smarter of them.
Well, right. And like I said, they did a lot of things really well. And here's where I'm going to give them a lot of credit. The people that stood on the stage, the people that taught the different strategies, they basically had like, okay, this is the person who teaches multifamily stuff, and this is the one who teaches all the seller financing and subject to stuff, and this person teaches renovation. So they all had specialized things that they taught that they had a lot of experience in. And I could attest, those people were legit. They were not phonies. They really did own a lot of property. They really did have a lot of experience, and they really did teach us how to use the strategy that they were teaching. It was very, very valid. But you may have found this just like I do. If you give a guy a toolbox, it doesn't make him a carpenter. We had all these tools. We had, all the different sets of knowledge about basically every real estate investment strategy that you could want. We didn't know how or when to use them or not use them. And we didn't have any wisdom or guidance because honestly, not everybody got to work directly with the people that were up on the stage teaching, right? Yeah. And 99% of the people in the audience were just like us. They were brand new. And they didn't own real estate, and they didn't have experience. And we asked around, we looked around, hey, we're looking for someone to mentor us with this. How many units do you own? How many flips have you done? And everyone was like, I don't know, I haven't done anything. We're like, neither have we. We're looking for people that can help us with this, who've been through it. And it was just crickets on that. So we said, well, screw it. We're going to do it on our own anyway. And that was a dangerous decision. Because we had all the tools.
Let's hear it, man. Keep rolling. So let's talk about losing some money.
He's not a carpenter. He's just dangerous. Because you can take these objects and do a lot of harm, and we were dangerous, and not without realizing it, of course. Everything was with best intentions. And we said, hey, we've learned how to go and raise private capital. We've learned how to acquire property. We've learned how to get it renovated. We learned how to sell it. We learned how to hold it. And we just went after it, and we went big, and we went and we raised a bunch of money, and we bought a bunch of property. And we made a whole bunch more mistakes in doing so that we didn't realize were mistakes at the time.
Well, what was the business model when it comes to raising money? Were you guys just trying to be 100% nothing out of pocket? And who'd you go to? Who'd you borrow money from? How much did you raise? Like, give us a little. That's usually a hang up for people.
Yeah. What little we had, we put in. I mean, I was like a year out of college, so I didn't have much. But we put in what we had. The vast majority of it was private capital, and it was primarily from family, close friends. It was people that we knew really well. And this is where after my lead in, you're going to cringe a little bit. A lot of the money that we raised was through having people convert retirement accounts to self-directed accounts. And we placed them with this administrator that ended up getting taken down by the SEC eventually. You mentioned there was a reason certain organizations weren't around anymore. Yeah, this was the company they dealt with, and we had people roll over IRAs and things like that, and we were doing lending out of that. All very sort of complicated things that can be very powerful and very risky. And we didn't know what we didn't know, and so ultimately, what ended up happening is as the whole thing came unraveled and we were losing money. Sure, we lost ours, but ours wasn't most of it. Most of it belonged to people that were extremely close to us and are extremely close to us.
What were you buying? You go a little bit at it because I'm going to come back to the losing money part. Don't get me wrong.
And by the way, and you'd asked how much. I think if you total it up and if you roll in the one, we did one or two hard money loans that were somewhat small. It was over $1 million.
Wow.
Capital. And so what were we buying? Well, here was one mistake. Focus is really important in anything that you do. And we did not have great focus. We ended up buying single family homes, condos, small multifamily, large multifamily buildings, different neighborhoods in the city, suburbs, all over the place.
And they're pretty, this is still 2000 before the market crashed. So you're buying some really expensive stuff too at that point.
Our first closings, we'd been working at it and laying the groundwork, raising the money, learning, getting out there, making offers. Our first closings were in April 2008. And then the biggest transaction we did, which was a series of apartment buildings, was in August of 2008, which 30 days later was September of 2008, which is when the bottom fell out. Now, obviously there were signals prior to that, but remember, I was young and dumb and blinded to all that because I was going to do this no matter what, and I didn't want to hear any of the market's going down. I was like, nah, don't want to hear it.
Man. All right, so let's talk about some of the other mistakes before we talk about losing money, right? So we're all over the place. We're not focused. Are we taking on larger rehabs? In retrospect, where else would you have done something differently here?
I teach people now that, especially on their first deal, but primarily just whenever they're newer, that it's important to minimize risk because all of this involves risk inherently. It's investment involves risk. But if you can minimize the risk with a solid base hit, what you can do is you're not going to have this deal to write home about, but you can also virtually guarantee that you will not make a business ending mistake. And when you take on, you mentioned big rehab projects, you take on something really ugly, whether that's ugly legal, meaning like, I remember we had this one deal where it was an apartment building that had been condoed out, but the garden unit, I guess, had not fully been condoed out, even though it had been resold and mortgaged. And we were trying to put this whole thing back together. It was in court. We didn't know it because it didn't come up on title. We took a huge bath on that deal on trying to get rid of the units that we bought because we were trying to reconsolidate and deconvert a building. We had no idea what we were doing. We thought we did, but we didn't know what was possible. So that's a lot of risk in that way. Gut rehabs, buying stuff like that, it's a lot of risk. And when you take on more risk, the potential scale of your mistakes get bigger. And if you make a big enough a mistake when you're early enough in it, you're going to say, I'm never going to do this again. And that's my biggest fear for people, because they're always the biggest mistake that investors make is not starting soon enough. They wait around because they want to hit a home run, and they think they're going to spot a home run on their first deal, even though there's people full time doing this that are doing 15 of them a month, and they've been doing it for 20 years, and people are holding out for a big deal. What they really need to do is hit a base hit and get on the field of play, get up to the plate and get started with a low risk, sound purchase.
Yeah. So 2 comments there. So agree 100% on the base hit. So one, real estate has been proven to work for hundreds of years. Like this works.
Yes.
Right. So the key is to just not get kicked out of the game. Right.
Right.
Don't get kicked out of the game. Stay in the game. Don't put yourself in a situation where you can get kicked out of the game. And just like it's done for hundreds of thousands of people, it will work. Going back to our quote, Mark, time is your biggest asset. Right.
Look at the shirt I got on. I don't know if you can see it. You see that?
Oh, there we go.
No way.
Screenshot that.
That's awesome. Real estate will never let you down, man. That's great. You gotta get on the back of it. You gotta get the time.
Yeah, there we go.
I've got deals right now. I got a house right now. I just signed the lease yesterday on this house. I bought it in 2011. And I'll spare you the details of the story, but basically I rehabbed it. I turned it around to sell it, but the market was dropping. And ultimately I couldn't sell it for what I was invested into it for. So I turned it into a rental. I did a poor job managing it. I racked up debt paying the property taxes when there was a tenant who wasn't paying, and I was slow to evict him. I made a lot of mistakes on it. I went through a lot of trouble with that house. But because of just time, because it's just been long enough, I have over 6 figures of equity in that, and I'm now cash flowing over $1,000 a month with the new lease that I just signed.
Yeah, rents went up too. So rents go up, values go up.
It was
Principal goes down.
Yeah, that's it. You got to just stay.
That wasn't
in the
even
game.
a base hit, you guys. That was a drop third strike. Like I shouldn't have. I mean, it was a bad deal. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
But 14 years later, no, I did the math wrong. 12 years later, it's actually a great deal. And ultimately, all of it will be if, like you said, Tom, if you can just stay in the game. Just keep
stay in the game. And then the other part of that comment too is like, for the person sitting on the sidelines waiting for that home run, how are you, or why are you going to get the home run as opposed to, I don't want to use myself as an example, or someone who has these relationships, spends money on off-market activity. Like, how are you magically going to get this deal that I'm not going to get, or the 100 other guys like me aren't going to get? Like, you need to get in the game. You need to make the relations.
Yeah.
And then you'll start it snowballs, man. It's not just going to fall on your plate. You're not special.
I got wholesalers that bring me deals that are listed on the MLS. I'm like, that's not a deal. Like that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about that.
Yeah, just
because they went and took some class over the weekend. But listen, I can hate on that guy because I was that guy. I thought I could outdo everybody right out of the gate, and
yeah,
you got to listen to people that are where you want to be or have been where you are. And that was a huge lesson that I took from all those mistakes, and still paying for it today. And it's you got to find wise counsel, and you got to actually listen to it, even when they're not telling you what you want to hear. Especially when they're not telling you what you want to hear.
So going through all that, I mean, I got two questions here, but the first one's more of you started having these fails, or you started hitting these roadblocks, or you started taking on more you could chew. Like, what was the mentality there? Were you like, I'll get through this, power through it? Like, were you giving up before you started? Were you thinking you could take it on? Like, give me some ideas about the mindset of those conversations amongst your partners, I guess, during that time.
It was really hard, man. I mean, it was really hard. And the failure was not an option. And you can easily look at what happened and say that was a massive failure. And by many standards, it was. It was a failure for a lot of reasons. But I can look back and say there's nothing that in that moment that I could have done that I didn't, there's nothing I wasn't willing to do, willing to try. It was at all costs. I've got to get through this. And to be honest, I'm actually I haven't given up on getting some of that money back for some of the people that lost it. Well, I'm literally still working on it.
Leading to that, like, you had to have some crazy tough conversation. We're talking $1 million plus, like some family. I think you might have even said too, like, how do you do that?
And we tried to keep going and any transaction, and we didn't lose money on every deal, just almost every deal, because it all kind of came down at once, but there comes a point that you realize, okay, like there's not, you're beyond salvaging that. Right. And whatever transaction it is, there comes a point, if you've lost money, there's a moment that you go, there's no other option. We have to sell it for a big loss, or there's no other option. We have to deed this property back to you, or to the person who put up the money, or whatever it is. Right. And I know that we kept people posted on what was going on. And we didn't hide the fact that we were going through challenges. But as long as there was hope, we were communicating hope. As soon as there wasn't, we just had to level with people, because again, these are people that we've known for a long time, family members, close friends. We can't lie to them. Not that I would anyway, but like, you just got to tell them what's up. It was extremely uncomfortable. It still makes me uncomfortable. But what are you going to, I mean, you just got to be upfront with people. And
tough conversation, lots of money. Did any of those relationships not make it past this scenario? Did you not talk to some of those people now because of that?
Yeah. Fortunately, that's not the case with any family members. But I also can't say that it didn't cause strain on those relationships. Of course it did. But yeah, a couple of the other ones, a couple of the friend ones didn't make it. Yeah. It bothers me to this day.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to pull on this a little bit because I want people to realize just the responsibility they're taking when they're. It seems so easy right now. Hey, I got a buddy who's going to give me 50 grand, 100 grand. Like this, this is the risk you're taking, right? Like you're paying him his interest or whatever, him or her his interest and his point. But like, man, like these are things that can happen and do happen.
Absolutely.
So,
and especially at times like this when things are moving real fast. That was one benefit that we didn't have to face that challenge at that time, is nothing moved fast. During the real estate downturn, the Great Recession, nothing moved fast. These days, I bet it'd be real easy to get caught up in something. We've all been there, right? Where you get what might be a great deal, and for whatever reason, you got to make a decision really fast. It's easy to miss something. I think that ultimately the best mitigator of risk is experience. And the only way to get experience is to do it. And so it's this sort of catch-22 where you have to learn while doing. And that's what becomes really important about starting with low risk transactions, so that you can learn a little. Because even on that low risk transaction, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to have some unexpected expenses, but the magnitude of the mistakes will be small enough that you can work through them. If you add 2 more zeros on the end of it, I'm not sure you can work through that unless you're already in the business of doing deals with that many zeros on them, and you've got more financial, wherewithal to be able to handle stuff like that. So I think, and starting, you have to work with people who have experience. If you want to have a big ego and you say, I'm not going to have a partner, I'm not going to partner on this deal, I'm not going to go work with a broker, I'm going to do it myself. That's why we made a lot of the mistakes that we made, because we either didn't have experienced people around us by choice, meaning we didn't listen to maybe the guy on the stage, or we couldn't find people that were experienced in our little networks, and we went ahead anyway. Had I realized it was a mistake at the time, I wouldn't have done it. But that's why I'm here now. And that's why every new investor client I take on, this is the stuff I tell them. Now, I'm not trying to freak them out entirely, but the fact that they need experience, they need to work with experienced people, they need to start off with low risk stuff. I'm speaking because I've been there and I've done it wrong and I've done it right now, thankfully.
I've said this before, but what people have now resource wise, whether it be bigger pockets or places like this, or just Facebook in general, like there was a lot of flying blind before the Great Recession. The internet, it's funny to say, like I try to tell my kids, like even like 2005, the internet just was not that big yet.
Yeah.
And what was on there was definitely lackluster. And you couldn't watch videos unless you just see the spinning thing. Like it was just very different. And the resources that everyone that's listening here has today, it was very different. So there's a lot of stories out there like yours where you go to these seminars, you learn to lean on these people, and sometimes you lean on the wrong networks, or sometimes you listen to the wrong people and don't listen to the others, whatever it might be. But I know how you got caught up in all this, because I saw a lot of that happen. Well, talk to me, when did you get your real estate license? When did you actually get that in the process? And talk to us about the journey kind of getting out of this scenario.
Yeah, what was the next 90 days after the tough conversations, right? Like what
God, dude, those went on for years. I was having those tough conversations. Like I had to go and like decompress and just kind of like be alone for a little bit after I had these conversations, meetings with attorneys, I just like a bunch of really emotionally hard stuff. And I would just go out to breakfast by myself to just like decompress and try to unwind from being so wound up from doing something that was really uncomfortable and really hard. There wasn't like one round of those conversations. They went on for a long time.
Because you're still in your early 20s. Like that's still like very like immature brain, immature like mindset, like what 5 years later or 10 years later, it's like, man, a world's apart.
Yeah, absolutely. So
you had to grow up probably during a lot of that, or a lot of that was a force of growing up.
Yeah. And I'm sure I carry some scars, and, some of it's productive because I made mistakes I won't repeat. Some of it is probably limiting because of my, some of those scars may hold me back from things that actually would be helpful now, but you got to take the good with the bad, right? All right. You said about becoming a broker. So becoming a broker initially wasn't my out. I first got my license in April of 2008. And I remember it was the fall of 2007 that we really went all in on this, right? And so we began researching areas, trying to make offers on properties. And we were frustrated by the general level of service or performance that we would get when we would reach out looking for brokers to work with. I remember looking up on whatever websites, trying to find people who had a lot of listings in a certain area or just had some transaction history, and calling people and leaving messages and say like, hey, I'm an investor in the area. I'm working with, you have a partnership where we have cash. We're looking to buy and sell multiple properties in your area. Could you give me a call back? And if I left 10 messages, I might get 4 calls back. And of those 4 calls, I normally would not have any conversations that were enlightening to me or somewhere I felt like I was really heard in terms of what we were looking for. And more often than not, we'd hang up the phone. I'd start getting automated MLS emails, property notifications, which was, from the same list I was getting from the last conversation I had. And like, that was the end of it. And so, we felt that one of us should get licensed so that we could get a little bit closer to the deal. And I'm good at taking classes and passing tests, so I did it. Now, on the other side of that, on the couple of deals where we happened to get in contact with a really experienced, really skilled broker, even in that market where the bottom had fallen out, we still made money. On the ones where we had a great broker going in and going out, we made money. In 2009, in 2010, it made literally all the difference. And when I first got the license, it was just to represent us. I wasn't trying to broker other deals. So what's funny is if you're following the timeline, I got my license in the same month that we were having our first closings, right? One of those closings, which was a condo on the south side, we actually probably bought it right. It was a newer building. It wasn't in bad shape. We had to do minor work to it, maybe 10 grand. And when I say 10 grand, I mean, like, I know everyone's like, oh, this rehab only took 10 grand. Like nothing is only 10 grand. This condo actually really was like 10 grand. We had to paint and, I don't know, replace some carpeting or something. It was not much to do. And we bought it for like 157 or something like that. And I just got my license. And so, I thought that, so what I did is I got in there and I evaluated all the closed sales of similar condos, which was, I think it was a 3-bed or 2-bed. It's like a 3-bed, 2-bath condo in that MLS area. And here was my brilliance. As a newly licensed broker, here's how I priced that condo. I took the recently closed 3-bed, 2-bath units in that MLS area, and I took the
averaged them out, baby.
I took the average. You knew it before I even said it. I took the average. So we priced it at 260. I still have this picture. I think it pops up on Facebook. It's me and my partner standing. We had our little folding table in our little khaki pants doing our open house. And we were so excited because this lady came in and said she's going to give us full price for the condo. We were like, we're going to be rich. We're like, yes, we're going to make like $80,000, however much it was. And then turns out she had like a 402 credit score. So not only did she not make an offer, but then nobody else did. And then we waited too long to lower the price. And then we waited too long to lower it again. And we did it too slow and we didn't do big enough drops. And so we chased the market down. And we ended up having to put a tenant in. Now we had a hard money loan on this. So that we were getting a lot of heat from him. So we had to stick a tenant in there. The lender worked with us because obviously he already had enough property and wasn't trying to get more at that time either. Nobody wanted more property at that time. We put a tenant in there. She totally scammed us. She'd already been let go from her job and we didn't know it. We did a verification of employment, but they did not and probably did not have to disclose that she'd already been terminated or identified for termination at the end of the next month. So the security deposit, the first month's rent's the only money we ever got from her. We had to evict her. She brought her babies into court to try to say that, I need more time and all this stuff. And they gave it to her. 9 months later, the sheriff breaks the door down and we have to rehab the place, which was way more than it was the first time around. And then ended up selling it for a price that allowed us to pay off the hard money loan and nothing else. So the entire down payment we lost years later. You know what's crazy about that? If we would have worked with a knowledgeable broker in that area, and somewhat to our credit, we tried. We did try and we couldn't get anybody. If they would have helped us price that at probably about 220, we probably would have sold it immediately. We would have made about $20,000 and we would have moved on. But little Alex with his brand new MLS access, priced it on the, the difference was it was tiny. It was a really small 3-bed, 2-bath. So it didn't sell like the average. It sold like the bottom end of the average. So one experienced individual could have changed that entire thing around.
Yeah, man, it's compounding mistakes then, right? You're stuck with this.
Yep.
That's everyone talks about flipping being so glamorous, but man, like when you have a mistake in general, like that example, but you have a mistake where rehab runs hot. Now the timeline's also hot, right? Now you're getting pinched on both ends, right? Now you might have to make choices on other things where you're not going to put out as good of a product as you originally thought, right? Like everything just gets pinched. Yep. And you're sitting there like, the walls are closing in on you and you got to get out.
And if the market's changing during all of this, the longer you go, the more it changes. And if it benefits you, okay, you got lucky. But if it doesn't, it goes the other direction, you're super screwed.
Yeah. And this whole chasing thing down the market in 2009, 10, 11 was crazy. It was like, you literally, if you dropped at 5, you should have been doing it 10. If you dropped at 10, you should have people literally chased it all the way down and then foreclosed. Like they could have just dropped it more 6 weeks before and then had it sold. So a lot of those crazy stories.
Yep. But the issue with flips is this shirt with the, you
lose your biggest asset.
Yep. Time heals all wounds. That's my adage. I tell people in real estate, and I use that deal I told you about, that my drop third strike. I use that as an example all the time. Time heals all wounds. And with a flip, that's the one thing you don't have. And so, it can really get away from you easily. And that's why I do caution new investors about not doing flips right away. I'm like, hey, unless you have some specialized knowledge, like if you're a skilled tradesman, you're going to do all the work yourself. You have the time, you have the money, and you can do all of that. And you can work with an experienced broker and a home inspector and an attorney, and all the people around you are experienced. You can probably get it done. It's just more the exception than the rule.
Yeah, and the thing that pisses me off is the narrative that, you flip to get income and then you do that for your rentals. Like flipping takes a ton of liquidity. You're still putting money down. Like you're still paying everything before the draw. You're paying the holding costs. You get a big payout at the end. But if you're sitting there, I don't have money for multifamily, like to buy a duplex. You probably don't have money to do a flip or to tackle the what ifs that can happen. Like you need a war chest of liquidity to cover yourself. Like it's just reality.
Or a war chest of risk.
Yeah. Far less risk to borrow your 3.5% at hard money with using hard money, have 100% loan to value and waiting that one out a few years and paying that back aggressively.
Yeah, with tenants paying you. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you mentioned the rental there. Where do you own now? Like, let's talk about the portfolio. Where are some of the places that you play around Chicagoland?
So my rentals are like right in the area I grew up, Richmond Park, Park Forest, Madison. I grew up in Richmond Park. Right. So I know in particular the neighborhood that I grew up in. I think I've brokered or personally bought, sold like over 70 homes in this one neighborhood. I know every house in it. I know who the builders were. I know what the weak points are, the structures, I know what tends to happen over time. I know that this model sells differently than that model. So are those wonderful and magnificent investment areas? Well, they have their upsides. A lot of people say, I don't like the taxes or, the school district ratings or whatever. But I believe very heavily in a piece of advice from Warren Buffett. He's a pretty decent dude to listen to, and invest in what you know. And are there better areas to have rental properties? I'm 100% certain of it. If objectively you said, what is the best possible area? There's probably a long list, but I don't know those areas. And I'm more likely to make a mistake in a great investment area that I don't know than I am in a mediocre investment area that I know really, really well. So
a lot of people bash on the South Suburbs in those areas, particular, whether it be rental license or be
the
water, Richmond Park water department's a pain in the ass to deal with, like for example, or Markham City Halls. Like all these different places are really difficult to deal with. And so when you're working with investors, is it really just understanding the ins and outs so you can buy based on the risk, or how do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of the landscape, and that's part of what it is to do business. And almost every municipality east I-57 has change of occupancy inspections for rentals and, crime-free licensing permits. And yeah, those are real things. Now, for me, I understand my place in that picture. And so when I show up for an inspection, yes or no, sir? Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. By when would you like that done? I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to, if they're listening to this, I hope they don't take advantage of me. But but I'm not. So I've in those towns, I've been doing business for so long. I've got a lot of goodwill there, and they know if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. They know that, if they ask me to do something, I will. Like I'm just so the relationships end up counting for quite a lot to pave that path a little easier. We're going through some stuff right now where we don't have them, and it is hell. It's absolute hell. And I'm learning as I've gotten more back into flips. I got 3 projects going on right now. One in the city of Chicago, 2 in the burbs, one in the burb that I haven't previously done a project and won't again, because it is hell, and I don't have a connection, and there's just no way in other than repetition and time, and I can go somewhere else. So you still have to pick. Right? You still have to choose where you're going to hunker down and develop a specialty and what have you. But there's challenges everywhere. I mean, the rent to price ratios there are good. I look at properties. I've got a short-term rental in Michigan, and a lot of the towns up there, especially not the lakefront towns, you've got little houses out in little towns with you look like, oh, the prices there are great. Why don't I have a rental there? Because the taxes are so low. Well, guess what? The rents are at least as low. If you look at a $200,000 house in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, that the taxes are $800, the rent's probably $900. I mean, it's so there's pros and cons to everything. Oh, and by the way, the market times for rentals might be a lot longer. I can rent property in the areas that we talked about very quickly because there's high rental demand. So nothing is bad or good. Everything is just different, and you just got to pick based on your knowledge and your circumstances and what you're willing to deal with.
So, you have the home field advantage down there, right? And I think that's a very valid point on taxes, right? It almost gets passed off to the renter wherever you go. Like I almost feel it's a 1-to-1 ratio, A neighborhood all the way down to D. What would be some other reasons though that people would want to be in Richmond Park, Olympia Fields, Madison? Like what? Yes, you have the hometown advantage, but if I'm looking there, what are some other benefits compared
Olympia
to
feels great. There's no rental
city?
License. Same with
right. Well, I think those are areas that you can still achieve a decent cap rate. And I know we normally don't talk cap rate when we're talking about single family homes, but what we're talking about is a relationship between rent amounts and prices. And all the way down on one end of the spectrum, you got areas that are, very, very low median household income, very high crime rates, very inexpensive purchase prices, and very high rents. You can buy a house for $100,000, turn around and rent it out for $1,500 a month. It's insane. But if you go to a place where you quadruple the sale price, you go instead of 100 now to go to 400. Does that mean I can quadruple the rents? So instead of 1,500, I can get 6,000. No, not even close. And so it's because of that relative price inflexibility of rents that there's a middle ground, like a Richmond Park, Matson type place, where, and we can talk about how to pronounce that town, by the way. There's a fun argument. There's a middle ground where you're not necessarily going to areas where you're going to have a lot of tenant challenges, but you can still make decent cash flow and still have some appreciation. It's a nice blend of the cash flow play and the losing money but hoping for appreciation play. It's a great middle ground between those things.
What about places like South Holland and Country Club Hills that they are always kind of playing games with the rental license and how do you advise your clients with stuff like that? Or what do you do?
I'm pretty cautious of anywhere that I would go into somewhere that there's an environment of restrictions. Now, yes, I have to do a change of occupancy inspection every time I turn a tenant at any of my rentals, but I just have to make sure the house is in good enough shape and I change the outlets or whatever they want me to do. Like that's at the end of the day, it's a little bit of a pain, but they're not going to tell me I cannot rent that home. And South Holland, I understand why they did what they did. It was the prime rental property town because they did not have a change of occupancy inspection. They did not have a permitting process. And it was an opportunity zone for Section 8 vouchers. So the Section 8 voucher paid an absurd amount of money. I mean, it was like a paradise, right? So now they got it broken up, and now they have a quota based on what ward you're in, and they can't take more than a certain percentage of rentals. That's really risky to get into, and the certificate doesn't transfer with the property either. So if they're full and someone tells you, I've seen it on listings, rental property certificate available on this house. No, I'm sure they're not trying to lie. They just don't realize that that's not true. That won't happen. I'm very hesitant about that. That's why I'm not into condos and townhomes. I know there's a lot of people that have done great with condos and townhomes. Not me. I was in the business when I saw condo associations literally go bankrupt. I was in the business trying to sell people's condos when 25% of the unit owners were delinquent on assessments, and there's not a lender in the world who would touch it. I was in the business when they started making all the new rules about how FHA approvals work for condos, and suddenly a huge portion of the market's cut out. And I don't want someone else to have the authority to decide whether or not I can sell it or rent it. And so I'm really skittish about areas that have capacity limits like that.
Yeah. And just to hit on the condo point, like, I've looked at enough condo deconversions now where you see, to no fault of your own as an owner, you can get slapped with a $20,000 special assessment.
Specials,
right? Yeah. Because we don't have the funds to do this. And if we don't do it, we're not going to have heat in the winter. Right. So there's no other option to either we got to sell or we got to fix this. And you weren't in charge of it. You didn't, but here it is on your plate. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can kick and scream, but at the end of the day, it's going to have to get done.
Yep. So I try to avoid that level of oversight and restriction. The town where I've got my short-term rental is a quota system. And of course, there's always a faction of town that's fighting to have that lowered, and they don't like the short-term rentals. And then there's all the other people that say, well, our town depends on this. And so there's this constant fight, and it makes me nervous. But I got to make sure that I do everything. Cannot risk that license at all, because if I lose it, they're full up now. Then what are my options?
Yeah.
What before we wrap here, ask one final question, kind of the crystal ball question. Like next 5-7 years, I'm going to say specific to South Suburbs. There's talk maybe again about the Piatone Airport. You got the casino going in over there off of Halstead. And Amazon built that big distribution over there. Like, what anything you're bullish on around the South Suburbs? Or
I think the casino is. I mean, it's tough to argue that that's not going to have a positive impact. The airport, I don't know about that one, man. That's been talked about for so many decades at this point. I don't think that's happening. The casino seems like it's probably going to be a pretty good thing economically, although obviously there's some other challenges that come with that. I don't know. You asked about inventory and how things might. Is there anything that's going to lighten this up and makes more property available? And I don't. Whatever it is, I don't see it. We have such low supply pretty much across the board at this point. I think it's going to continue that way until something that we can't see right now happens. But in terms of individual areas in the South Suburbs, probably the only hot spot, if you want to call it that I would be aware of or know about, would likely be due to the casino. Other than that, honestly, I mean, it's not a bustling commercial capital. It's not a place where you're going to have, the next Oak Brook pop up. Stuff like that's not going to happen there. But a lot of people live there, and there's strong rental demand. And I think you make a good business out of it. I have.
All right, let's do this, man. Let's wrap. Alex,
right.
You ready for these questions?
Let's.
All right, man. What's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this? Ups and downs, man. That was a roller coaster of an interview, if anything. How do you been able to do all of this while so many others wish they could on the later side?
Well, I think something we talked about, which is just that literally never give up. Because with what should have happened, I probably should have been out of the business. I probably should have quit, but I didn't. I turned that into learning lessons. And maybe that's part of it, is that I am constantly learning. There's no failure that I go through of any scale that I don't learn something from. And there's no success that I have that I don't learn something from. So if I'm always paying attention, I'm always learning, then anything I do a little bit well, I'm going to do again. And anything I mess up, I'm going to make sure I don't do it again or somehow learn from it. I think that's probably the biggest difference between me 15 years ago and me now, is the accumulation of the lessons that I've intentionally learned and implemented.
Nice. What is one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Do it now. People are scared about interest rates. They're saying there's a bubble. I don't think there's a bubble. The foreclosure thing is disproven. I look at the foreclosure pipeline. It's not there. Default rates are at record lows. The foreclosure thing's not happening. They said baby boomers were all going to sell their homes. You know what happened in the last year with baby boomers? They became their share of all property purchases went all the way up to 39%, meaning 39% of home buyers in the last year were baby boomers. They were supposed to be selling right now. They're the biggest generation of buyers. So if interest rates can go up into the sevens and it doesn't tank the market, and we still have 2 months of supply, I think you can feel pretty okay that the market is supported by sound fundamentals, and you can buy property right now. And as we've talked about several times here, the time is going to be your friend.
Think about what baby boomers went through in their generation. 7% actually isn't that bad. That's actually pretty
they would love it if it
don't
were
even
for the
flinch,
last
baby.
20 years. Yeah. You hear every time it comes up, in the 80s, they were 18%.
Yeah,
They were.
yeah.
And people still bought and sold homes because people still needed to move. People don't move because of interest rates. They move because of family changes. And so as an investor, you have to play that, you have to use that knowledge. But I would say start now, because again, the number one mistake I see is you wait too long. And I always relay this Chinese proverb to everybody that I talk to. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
We've used that one on here before, so if you're confirming, I might know what I'm talking about. Awesome.
Now you got to buy on sound fundamentals, though. Don't buy something that's not cash flowing. Don't do that. Make a good investment decision.
Have a good investment-minded broker is the overarching lesson for that. So cool. Alex, what do you do for fun?
So I like to, at least more so in the summer, I like to smoke meats. Just did a nice pork shoulder here this past weekend. So I'm into barbecue. I'm into scotch and good bourbon. I'm into all that stuff. That's the stuff that I like personally. I spent most of my time I spend with family, going to kids' sporting stuff, kids' activities, going out to Mexican restaurants.
Nice.
Yeah.
Boom. All right. Alex, give us a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you'd recommend to our listeners.
I would recommend the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think that in order to master anything else, you first have to master yourself. And it's a book about how your brain works and how to apply it. It's not some kind of like mental exercise. I mean, there's some great things in there about how to get yourself to do the things you need to do consistently so that you can become great at whatever it is you're doing. So I think that's a really great and applicable book for people.
Awesome. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
I would highly recommend, on the legal side, Gary Davidson at Castle Law. I was introduced to him across the table when I was working with a hedge fund, and he was on the other side of a lot of deals. So I one way or another, I've been doing deals through him or with him for over 10 years. And he and his office have been helpful, not just in skillfully processing the everyday transactions, but also in we talked about experience. He's been through so many different things. I can throw oddball scenarios at him, and he's been through it before. And so he's helped me navigate some of the more complicated things, minimize risk, come up with the solutions.
Yep. Gary, episode 79. I thought I was a good networker until I met him. He's got a guy for everything, and he connects everyone with everything. So
you think one day we could get him to be a Bears fan?
He's a Packers fan.
You think we could ever get him to be a Bears fan, though?
I don't know how much business you do with them.
That's a good point. We got to work on that.
So, all right, awesome. Alex, you provided a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
I would say that if you have more questions about some of the things that we talked about today, you can find me easily on anything out there, LinkedIn, Facebook. My real estate brokerage team is called Chicago Southland Homes. So if you just Google Chicago Southland Homes, contact me through the method of your choice. I would be happy to talk with anyone about their career in investment and getting that started, or maybe maybe expanding upon something they're already doing, or if they have a specific property they're looking to, to sell to an investor, whatever it is. I mean, whether it's me or another client, I'm sure I could help somebody out. So yeah, Chicago Southland Homes, Alex Fenske, you can look me up.
All right, it's good stuff. Mark, are you ready for the Chicago Facts? Who are we playing
Ready for the Chicago Fact. Today's sponsor, Perry Farella, First Community Mortgage Bank. It's Megan J. It's either Megan or she put 2 E's. I'm not sure. So we'll just say I'm going to go with she wrote. Megan J. bought a t-shirt actually about 7 months ago now. So thank you, Megan, for doing that. And if myself or Alex gets this question right, you'll get a $50 gift card brought to you by First Community Mortgage Bank.
All right, sounds good. So before, our guest today was slinging loans over at Wells Fargo Financial. He's a Purdue grad, and Purdue's obviously not in Chicago, but we got a lot of Big Ten presence here. So I got a Purdue question for you. Let's see how well you know the old university at Tippecanoe County, Mark. All right, so I'm going to name 4 facts about Purdue. I'm going to name 4 statements. One of these is false. You got to tell me which one is false, okay?
Okay.
All right. It's the first university to have its own university-owned airport. Orville Redenbacher is one of the many proud alums. The Purdue-Illinois football rivalry plays for the Cannon Trophy, and that dates back to 1906. The alumni of Purdue have, all of them combined, have won 104 Olympic medals. Which one of these 4 statements is false?
Oh, man. I'm purely guessing.
Yeah, I wouldn't think you would know any of this, but...
The only thing I know about Purdue is they're Boilermakers and Glenn Robinson basketball. That's like the only 2 things I got for Purdue.
Kyle Orton, Drew Brees.
Oh yeah, Drew Brees. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna go with 104 Olympic medals. What are you gonna say, Alex?
Same.
No, you gotta go with something different. That way we give Megan. What would be your second choice?
All right, so it's definitely not the first 2. So it would be the third about the Purdue-Illinois rivalry.
Dude, you guys nailed it. 104 Olympic medals.
Yeah. All right.
That number, and I stole that number from Indiana University's website. I figured I'd taken the other.
Oh, harsh.
Throwing the IU stat in there. Way to snip
Megan,
that out.
Megan or Megan, thanks to our brilliant guessing, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by Perry Farella and First Community Mortgage Bank. So thanks for buying the gear on the Straight Up Chicago Investor merch store. Yeah, that was awesome, man. Alex, that was a great episode. Thanks for coming on. Tom, thank you as always. Thank you very much again, Alex. Thank you as always, Tom. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.